that introduction is going to be longer. Hi, so the topic of this discussion today in this panel will be fostering diversity. How can we build this in-demand company culture? Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Sanjaya, and by day I'm a consultant in digital customer experience platforms, whereby I help organizations create greater experiences for their customers throughout the entire customer journey. At the same time, one of my personal passions is exploring ways of effective communication to bring awareness and action towards social causes. Today's topic, we'll be having a conversation about diversity and how we can foster this company culture, which is actually quite a rather big topic. So for the purpose of this 90-minute panel discussion, we will be focusing on three main areas. They are, what does diversity actually mean? What are the challenges in fostering diversity, and practical applications and examples that foster diversity? So without further ado, I would like to really introduce our panelists for today, starting off with Tahir Hussain. He is the founder of the Unstoppable Millionaire Academy, author, entrepreneur, trainer, strategist, and investor. Welcome, Tahir. Thank you for taking the time out today.
Pleasure being here. Thank you so much. Excited.
Me too. Giva is next. Giva Samyanathan. Am I pronouncing her last name correctly?
Yes, you are.
Great. Giva is the founder and master trainer of ECTA, an organization that focuses on social intelligence and cultural competent communication as a vehicle to improve workplace retention, engagement, and profitability. Giva is also founder of Malaysia Beach Clean and a voiceover talent amongst many other things. Thank you, Giva, for joining us today.
So glad to be here with all of you as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And next, we have Jürgen Bubeck. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Jürgen? Great. Jürgen joins us from Germany, and he has had an illustrious career in one of the largest pharmaceutical organizations in the world, Boehringer Ingelheim. His work involves animal and human health, pharmaceutical treatment options, and he is also very interested in the bond between pets and their owners. Thank you very much, Jürgen, for joining us today.
Thank you for this nice introduction. I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, we have Nigesh Arman. Nigesh is currently the head of social and services at Leaderomics Digital, focusing on building and bringing to market learning experience platforms such as the app called Nicole. Hi, Nigesh. How are you?
Hi, Sanjay. I'm good. Looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have in a short while.
Thank you. I know you just came off one, and it's a Friday evening, so I really appreciate you making time today. And last but not least, we have Cheryl Barreto. Cheryl Barreto is the director and founder of Freshly Simple. Cheryl comes with a vast experience of talent acquisition and HR, and her experience spans over multiple continents. Cheryl, good evening, and thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Yeah, good evening, Sanjaya. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm very excited to already be on a diversified panel.
That's exactly right. Amazing, great. Okay, I think we have a lot to cover in a very short time, so I'm going to go straight into it. But before we go into the topic, I thought the audience will benefit from getting to know you a little bit more. So I wanted to ask you a few questions so that the audience can get to know you. So starting with Giva, your organization is called ECTA. What's the story behind it and the name of ECTA? And why did you choose that name for the work that you do around social intelligence?
All right. Thank you, Sanjaya. Yes, we call ourselves as ECTA, as in ECTAA. It simply means oneness in Sanskrit. When I was in the midst of my early days and when I was searching for a name, I wanted something that says unity. There is no exclusion. I wanted everything to be in oneness because I think I come from a philosophy and a belief and a strong belief that oneness, we all as a human are one. So when I found this name ECTA, okay, so it's spelled differently for English purposes. So I felt that, wow, this really resonates to what I want to do, what I want to speak about, and the area that I'm championing today in social intelligence as well. So it's ECTA for that reason.
ECTA. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, ECTA, yes.
I have a diverse ability of enunciating and pronouncing, even though I'm a fluent English speaker. Thank you, Eva. So next, I'd like to ask Jürgen. Jürgen, just a trivia question. How many pets do you have, since you say you like to research the bond between pets and animals?
Okay, so that's a nice question, and thank you for that. But at the moment, just one, yeah, because honestly, my workload and my time consumption doesn't allow several animals, yeah, because I believe that animals deserve the same, time and efforts and love like humans, and so I have an outdoor cat, so that means a nice cat door, so she decides whenever. An old lady, she's 19, so she's now 18 years with me, and of course, having the challenges like we all will have or have when we become older. But I grew up with dogs and cats all my life, so this is part of me. And so, as said, at the moment, one black cat, which is a lucky cat, despite all the prejudice about and stupid things people tell you about black cats. So, and whether they come from right or left, I don't care. They just go in the one or the other direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I believe, of course, it's better to have one that you can give a lot more attention, love, and care than to have a lot that you have to, spread yourself thin a little bit. Thanks, Jürgen. All right, Cheryl, you have an extensive experience in HR and talent acquisition around the world. With such exposure to diverse types of people, what would you say are some of the things that you found that actually are common amongst us and that brings us together?
Of course, with all my experience being in India most of the time, and then of course US and now Malaysia, and of course dealing with different continents all across the world, worked in a pharmaceutical which was globally present. So yes, I think one characteristic that we all have in common is that we're always seeking to learn a lot, right? And when I mean to say seeking to learn a lot, because of the various cultures that we interact with, we keep on learning. And I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned in my entire career, that we never stop learning with the various cultures we interact with and we deal with day in, day out.
Great. Fantastic. Learning, of course, we all want to learn and grow. Thank you. Next, Tahir, a quick one for you as well. Your work is around wealth creation, right? So one of the components that I've read up about what you talk about when it comes to wealth creation is mindset. What is a mindset that no matter who you are, where in the world you're from, is something that we can all adopt to live more fulfilling lives?
Great question. And just to put it simply, mindset is basically a set of beliefs of an individual that is influenced by the culture, the environment, the family, the society they grew up in. And based on those belief patterns, they react, feel, think, behave in a certain way. So, and with today's topic, this is going to be extremely exciting because we can put two different people from two different cultures in the same situation and they react differently. So that's mindset in a nutshell, and it's a pretty exciting place to be at.
Thank you, Tahir. That's a great insight, Tahir. And last but not least, we have Nigesh. Okay. I had two questions in my mind, but I wanted to. I'm seeing which one to ask you. Okay, I'm going to go with actually what inspired you to work in the field of building learning experience platforms.
So this goes down to the core purpose that I live my day-to-day life in, which is to constantly add value to other individuals, and through that, I add value to myself. So one of the ways that I found real fulfillment doing this is in the space of learning, developing, or working with other people. And also, I'm a tech geek as well. I love technology. I love software. So I thought, let's marry these two things together and let's bring solutions out to people where now they can start deciding based on their behaviors, based on their sort of culture sets, how they would like to learn and what's the best way that they can learn. So that challenge is an everyday challenge, and that's why I'm in this space and I love being in this space. And I'm going to resound what Cheryl said just now. This is truly a very diverse group of people we have here, from oneness to not caring about where the black cat comes from to HR leadership all over the world, and also the whole mindset thing about wealth creation from Tahir as well. So thanks for having us all here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, great. Thanks. I hope the audience got to know you a little bit better in that very short period moment that we had. Okay, next up, what I wanted to do was, before we actually get into the depths of how can we foster diversity, I thought it might be great to actually define and give some context around what our understanding from your experience of diversity is, right? Starting with you, Tahir. What does diversity mean to you, and how can it be applied to wealth creation?
So, for me personally, let's start with me personally, and I want to give a quick family history here. So my grandparents come from India, and we're talking about country diversity just from a pure mindset and a wealth point of view. So they come from India. My parents come from Pakistan. We grew up in Dubai pretty much our entire life, then spent a couple of years in US, and now I'm coming in live from Kuala Lumpur. So talk about diversity. So that's like 5-6 countries right there. So growing up in Dubai, spending over 30 years there, Dubai or UAE caters to over 200 countries as we speak. So for me, that came naturally in that context till I started being in a couple of countries where we were like, okay, they were pretty set in a certain way. So for me, talk about diversity, it's home to me. So diversity comes naturally. And then diversity from a country perspective would mean that different people from different backgrounds, ethnicities, colors, and countries coming together for a common goal, which brings me to the second question you're asking about wealth. Money doesn't understand color, citizenship, where you come from. It's ones and zeros, right? I mean, we have a programmer here, right? So it's ones and zeros. So as long as money can work and move around people who understand it, it works. Now, I understand that there are certain countries that might have an unfair advantage when it comes to wealth compared to a couple of third world countries, probably, but the fundamental rules do not change. And then once you understand these rules, it starts getting exciting. I just want to put in a quick limiting belief, especially with third world countries when it comes to money, when they look at Western countries and they would say, if only I could do that, I would have been rich. And to me, that's just not how money works, because there are a lot of people in those countries in similar or worse situation that are performing better when it comes to wealth, even if they're in the minorities. And that is what is pretty exciting. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Tahir. Okay. Moving on to Cheryl. From a perspective of talent acquisition, which is what some of your professional experience, right? What does diversity mean? Can you speak to general? What does diversity mean from a talent acquisition perspective?
For me, I would just categorize it into three basic statements. One is equal opportunities for all. And when I say about equal opportunities, the major problem that everybody faces today is the pay scale between men and women, which still differentiates to a large extent, which I think is my primary focus when it comes to talent acquisition. Second is elimination of unconscious bias, which I feel plays a very important role many a times in deciding the right candidate, whether in a selection of a candidate. And the last part is an inclusive environment. Very important to make a person feel inclusive in whatever decisions you take, in whatever communication you want to convey, and how transparent you want.
Great. Thanks, Cheryl, for that. Next, Giva, let me ask you. So we've heard of emotional intelligence, intellect intelligence. Now you have a term that I've seen you use called social intelligence. Tell us a little bit more about what social intelligence is and how does that relate to fostering diversity?
All right. When we talk about diversity, this truly triggers powerful responses that require social intelligence. So what does it simply means is, you see, one thing is we need to pick is we need to have social awareness. That means we need to sense how about others. And secondly is, what are you going to do with the awareness that you have? It simply also says a person who's highly socially intelligent, this person will be able to pick up all social cues. This person will be able to interpret that to actually produce an effective communication. It simply means like trying to understand what's your mood, just trying to pick up the reactions. Are you in a good mood, bad mood, sad? All in the pretext just to get to know the person. You'll be able to notice that at least this is something you can do until you foster to say that I'm really making the connection and getting to know the person better. This gesture simply says only one thing. you are actually looking the person as a human first. The fact that the culture and the background is second. You see, so social intelligence is all about picking the cues, the social cues about the person, being socially aware of the person instead of even trying to understand them at the emotional level. Just pick up all the cues about them and understand them. First of all, how they are first, and before you go into say that, you know what, let me make that connection to speak more. Perhaps when you see that person as a human, you may be able to ask the most right question instead of asking a question that might not be in the right context at that point of time.
Right. So if I understood you correctly, it's about understanding the person first before the objective that you have, right? Having that in front of mind first. Awesome.
Yes,
Great.
that's
Love
about
that.
being socially aware. Yes, all right.
Great. Fantastic. All right, Nigesh, to you. Cheryl mentioned one, gender. Gender is one of the elements in terms of diversity that we hear about. Ethnicity is one. What are some of the other more not so spoken about categories or varieties of people that we should also keep in the conversation of fostering diversity?
Right. So, first off the bat, I want to say, like, what Jiva just mentioned was actually one of the core differences or core way that we can look at diversity differently, where you look at the person as a human being first, and each human being actually is emotionally, personality wise, capability wise, and also experience wise different from one person to another. So if you focus on that first, you're already going to see that each individual is different at their core. So that's one that we kind of forget very often, because you're sitting across a human being who is different from you. That's one. Another one is we kind of forget disabilities as well. Like, we don't talk about this much because it's very easy to pin on something you can see, not something you don't usually see. So when you talk about gender, when we talk about race, those are things that you see on the surface itself. But disabled people, maybe they have difficulties mobility, they don't get to move a lot. But how are we going to create a diverse society with them included in there? The other one is social mobility as well. People have different social mobility or educational mobility as well. How are you going to create an equitable environment for these different people? Because you can't expect someone who is educated with a master's and all that, right, to compete with someone who didn't get a chance to go through that. So how do you give equal opportunity to these different groups in different areas that will kind of help them as well? So when we look at diversity, it's easy to pin on the very visible things, but there's a lot of layers for somebody to go through, because human beings are very complex and our societies are also very complex, and how we work through that, that's where the core diversity is.
Thanks. Thanks, Nigesh. That's great. Yeah. So I'll leave the summary for later in the interest of time. But yes, so I'm going to move on to Jürgen. Jürgen, first of all, am I saying your name correctly? Making sure.
Yes, absolutely perfect.
Great. Jürgen, I wanted to ask you a question on your experience working in a large pharmaceutical organization like Boehringer, which is, and I understand that you shared with me they did start adopting some diversity culture program, right? What is it currently? What is the experience that you have right now working in a company that has already adopted something like this?
Let me just start with a short feedback, because I'm the last one. So I had the privilege to listen to my counterparts here. And, let me make one statement first. Diversity was always existing. It's not new. So it's not a buzzword we created. It's just the awareness of it. And one of the things which is quite important, and then working in such an organization like me globally, is I grew up mobile phone and computer naive. That was not existing. When I think of my childhood, we had social media, we called it outside. That was our social media, as simple as that. So we met people, we talked to each other, and no one was doing this 8 hours a day. So that was just not existing. And even when I, at university, when in my PhD, we had one IBM computer, for all PhD candidates, and we had night shifts so that everyone can do his statistics, because statistic takes a night to run, and all this kind of stuff. So diversity was so I started experienced diversity at university, because fortunately in Germany already at my time we had people from all over the world, different genders. also different sexual, favorite things. So that was all existing. We just don't talk about it. Yeah, we pressed it under the surface. And I love in particular also what we just heard about disabled people, because diversity is also driven by our technical, things. We have now the chance to meet everyone at every place in the world. And a disabled person can do a perfect job like I, sitting at one chair in front of the screen now, like we do, and a computer. There's nothing needed anymore. So everything is there. So, and looking what happens, I'm not 26 years in the pharmaceutical industry. I worked 15 years on the human pharma side, now for 11 years on the animal health side, 24 years with Boehringer Ingelheim, so in the same company. So I could overlook a development of that. And I would just say something became, for me at least in our company, it became something normal. This is the new fantastic thing. We don't talk about it. So we have not used this term up to now, but for me, the inclusion part is now the real deal breaker. We have accepted diversity, look at all the national laws everywhere. Gays can marry, and there's so many things which have happened over the last decades, which we take more or less as normal. But now the interesting part, in particular in a company, is how to include it, how to make it alive, how to make it a cultural thing. And I would say with 50, I think we have currently 52,000 employees all over the world. I'm working in the headquarters for that, but I can see that all what the other people already mentioned, I experience every day. So this is, and one thing we probably discuss later on is the next transition in the inclusion is the leadership skills. Yeah. So how do our leaders make it happen? Because we agreed on the theory, but now it's, how to make it work. So I think that's the positive thing. And I'm working in a family-owned business. Yeah. So it's the largest family-owned business pharmaceutical company, which is not on the stock exchange. And the good news for me is we don't think in quarters. We think in years. Yeah. So, and you feel also that in the part, we have a lot of programs, that people can come to headquarters. Oh, I go abroad. And also for the leaders now, specific training sessions, interactive sessions, where it's all about diversity and inclusion. And we have even now a huge department in headquarters to organize these things globally.
Great, brilliant. Jürgen, can I add another question to that? So what's your favorite experience working in an organization that's already aligned with diversity, and now even talking about inclusion as well? What's one story or one moment that you can say is your favorite benefit from that?
The greatest benefit I see is, I'm working for the last couple of years. I'm a global project leader. So, I have working in a matrix structure. So I don't have direct reports, but in the end, I'm the overall accountable person. So I always said, if things are running smoothly, it's my team. If running not smoothly, it's me. But I can deal with that. So I think the nicest part is that for nowadays, I don't care anymore about where the person is located, what gender it has, what background. It's just natural. I know we have wonderful people in our company, and we do that. And another thing which is really, really beautiful to experience is team is no longer thank you, someone else is doing it, but it's really meaning we are sticky. We have one target. We are all accountable and responsible for what we are doing. And also another thing is the diversity and inclusion part helps. It's a different communication level to the leadership, top management. It's no longer you are afraid of, you have to talk to the board. Why? No, it's okay. It's a much more normal thing, and it doesn't matter whether the boss is a man or a woman. So we have really made a huge thing. And also, if we are still not perfect, but for example, for Boehringer Ingelheim, at least I know that what Cheryl mentioned in her talk in the beginning, the rate of women in top management positions have significantly increased over the last 25 years. There's still a way to go, but it's wonderful. And I guess, while politics still meaning they need a quote, fortunately, my company believes we don't need a quote. We do it by ourselves.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much for that sharing, Jürgen. All right. So before we move on to the next segment, I want to take a quick moment to talk to the audience out there and remind the audience, please participate. We are actually looking at the chat box on the right, somewhere on the right of your screen or some side of your screen. Please give your feedback, put in some comments, even ask some questions to the panelists. We will try to answer them throughout the discussion today. And the more you participate, there might be some great attractive prizes by the end of the summit for the ones who have participated the most. So the next question that I have, our next segment, is actually asking why is it important to foster diversity in company culture? And I'll ask this question to the audience. So please send in your thoughts on that as well. So on this segment, Tahir, if I could ask you, in organizations, one of the key things that we all have to look at the end of the day, right? It's a business. Revenue growth, ROI is really important. How does fostering diversity contribute to the bottom line?
And this would be a conflicting answer within the question itself, because you mentioned the bottom line in terms of revenue and the number there. So while diversity, generally speaking, is great, we spoke about genders and human beings and cultures. Corporate organizations, I also realize that it also depends a lot on the business that you're in. Ideally speaking, and I want to quote a couple of misconceptions around diversity first, so our audience can understand that better. So one of the misconceptions is, oh, we don't want to do diversity. The minorities need to get their share of quota taken care of, so that, and who's going to babysit them? So that's a pretty common thing in companies that struggle, where and that's just a mindset, right? So where they are resistant to this concept. This, by the way, also works when immigrants go to a different country to make a living and build themselves up, and they get that kind of resistance coming out from the business world or the business itself. So for a business person running a couple of businesses around the world, what's important is you need to definitely look at your bottom line, your basic number, and then depending on how big of a scale you're building the business, you realize that what kind of cultures would you want to have, if not all of them, in a way that they work harmoniously with each other. And then here's the challenge. So let's say culture A, B, and C, 3 different cultures, you're bringing them together. The person, the leader who's supposed to bring them together, if they don't believe in it, will have more fires to put out than actually the business happening. We can see a political struggle within a company, corporate structure, and Jürgen just spoke about that, that a lady boss versus a man who doesn't think much of her, as an example, which would be a gender discrimination in this situation. But then how do you keep a tab on the number to make sure that the business itself doesn't suffer and still create that culture? In small businesses, unfortunately, it doesn't work. Because small businesses would be like, nope, that doesn't work for me, and we have to let go. Or maybe these cultures work and these wouldn't, not yet at least, and then let's see how we can take the next step. So that's on the downside of why extreme diversity may not be the best solution for a business. So as long as the business can keep an eye on the bottom line, and again, we started this in a very beautiful way, and treat every human being as a human being who comes from that culture, and then understand what that culture means for you as a business in terms of strength and or weaknesses, and can you adapt them? I'll give an example of the Virgin Group. One of the things they talk about is how they work as a group of companies, how not to fire people, regardless of where they come from, but readjust them in a different position, company, account, or a corporate structure, so that they don't have to let go of people. And we saw this with Mr. Tony Fernandez, the chairperson for AirAsia, doing the same thing. So that's my take on business, both from a pros and a cons point of view.
Great. Thanks, Tahir. Jürgen, before I ask the next question to you, I just want to clarify because you mentioned it a little bit earlier. So I thought that there at the company that you work at one time, it wasn't really a conscious practice or a message around fostering diversity and inclusion. And then sometime in the past, there was a program put together where there was a team. Is that my correct understanding?
Not absolutely, no. So it was, making conscious decisions about diversity and inclusion is, as Tahir just said, to my understanding, not possible. You can only set a framework, in which you want to work in, but you cannot, order diversity. You cannot order inclusion. So when we talk about culture, obviously, it has to work differently. So I would say, with the sheer increase, enlarge of the company in global perspectives, and maybe as one of the biggest, as we all know, going to China, which is just such an important market you cannot neglect with all the challenges. So you if you want to be successful, and I think Nigel and Tahir mentioned it also, you have to understand and accept the culture in a country. And I can only say you one thing, and even it's not your question, but I apologize for that. But I went through one merger and acquisition where we bought a double size company. Yeah. So believe me, that was the most intensive 3 years of my life. And it's really what Tahir said, not easy to bring. And it was a French company. So it was French and Germany. We are very good neighbors. However, we have completely different ideas on how to do business. France, from a very hierarchical point of view, with elite universities, and Germany, where we are now, we have just, we have killed so many layers in the reporting structure. So we became much more broad, more empowerment. So that was really, really an interesting, let's call it positively, an interesting thing when it's about diversity and in particular inclusion.
Great, thanks Jürgen. I want to find out a bit more about how you address that, but we'll take it up in a later section. I would like to move on to Jiva. Jiva, under the current, the current circumstances that we're dealing with, right? Working from home for almost 2 years, most of us, has this helped or hurt conversations and action regarding diversity based on your experience?
Perhaps just to a little extent, but not much. You probably will ask me, why did I say that? You see, a person who has got high values and who actually embrace cultural differences, they would not feel any differences whether they have to work behind the screen or whether they have to work in a person. You see, generally we humans believe that, that we just need to socially interact. We need to see each other. Work can only get done if we speak, because we need to really express each other's emotion and all that. But then having said that, we have been successful the last 2 years. We made it through. A lot of communication do happen. But to some people, they may find it challenging because, they feel that only face-to-face interaction could prevail. Solutions could only happen. I must add on to this part. There are organizations like DHL, for instance. They actually won award to be as the best employer for the last 2 years, because one of the culture they practice, I'm previously from DHL myself, okay? One of the culture they practice is by putting people first. And I must say, there are many other organizations in Malaysia especially, they are already doing that, putting people first. And I must second to what Tahir's last sentence, he said that, by treating people just as the people, and I think there was a comment that came up, is if you start valuing every people just the way what they are and who they are and appreciating their strength, it regardless whether you're working behind the screen or you're whether working in present, whether you're speaking to each other. So yes, it may have an impact to a certain extent, but it does not have a greater impact during this period, the last 2 years, what we're experiencing. That's really my personal thought and how I see, because some organizations are doing very well in this area.
Great. Thanks, Jiva. Jiva, right? Jiva.
Yes, Jiva.
Okay. I'm practicing. All right. Thanks, Jiva. So Cheryl, I think Can you actually share a story or an experience that you went through in your own life that enforced in you why the culture of diversity is so important, especially in the workplace? Cheryl, I think you're on mute, Cheryl.
Yeah, sorry. I'll go back to an example when I was transferred by my organization to US to head HR. And as I told you that our company had actually acquired a plant in Michigan, Detroit. So for me, being in India all my life for 46 years and then being transferred to a completely new culture, new environment, and totally new people was quite a challenge. And first of all, when you've acquired an organization and you are going there, you are always look like somebody who's come to do the firing. That's what people feel when you acquire a company. So I was looked as a total outsider, and it became very difficult for me to make them understand that I'm actually come here to create a sort of, I'm like a catalyst, between the main group in India and you in the US. But that was not the way I was seen. And for them to accept me and for me to adapt to their culture, it took me a while. But having said all that, I feel that when I joined, the company was just 62 people. By the time I was there for 2 years, the company grew to 130 employees, where I was responsible for hiring an n number of people because we were expanding. I do remember at one instance, we had to appoint a research scientist. And I had three resumes in front of me. One was an American, the other was an Indian, and the third person was a Mexican. And I remember very clearly that all three of them were really good. Okay, and it was not a bias, but the Indian guy was really very smart. Okay, but I just could not vouch for him fully because I'm an Indian, and then I felt that they will say that she's come. And the first person she's going to appoint is an Indian. So I was already going to create that misunderstanding. So I put the three resumes in front of the person who I was hiring for, and I said, "Who do you think I should take?" He's saying, I think I don't want. I think we'll go for the American because he'll be used to our culture and everything. I told him, I think you're making a wrong decision, but I was new that time. I could not really impose my thoughts onto them, and I said, okay, go ahead. You won't believe it. In 2 months, the hiring manager actually he didn't know what to do. He was literally tearing his hair off, by what did I do? He said, you advised me to take the Indian, and then he told me very frankly, I thought you were telling me to take the Indian because you're from India. And yes, so he told me very frankly, but after 3 months, we appointed the Indian and he's still working in the organization. So it only shows sometimes that we fear, right? We have a fear because we feel that we belong to a certain culture and class or a community. And if we do that, then what are we actually trying to project? But had I been very adamant and said, no, this is a good candidate, we would have saved the company money, effort, and time. And I didn't speak at the right time being HR. So sometimes I feel, this experience has taught me that sometimes you should not worry about where you come from. You have to worry what the organization needs at that moment in time and put back all your inhibitions that you have and do what is right. So this is one great example that I can give you. And I think adapting and acceptability are the two most important things if you want to get in inclusivity in an organization. Very important.
Thanks, Cheryl. I mean, my personal takeaway was 2 points. What from that story was the unconscious bias, right? The assumption that just because you and the candidate is Indian, that part of it, and then also communication. How can you actually navigate knowing that maybe some people are biased, or doing a bit of what Giba was saying about understanding the person first before communicating a message. So a combination of those is what I take away, and I think I can apply that to different parts of work life, not just in hiring. Right? Great, thank you so much. Okay, moving on. We have a lot more to cover, so move on very quickly to the next segment. I wanted to spend a bit of time on what are the challenges in fostering diversity. We've covered a bit here and there, but let's take it a bit further and share a bit more. Staying on Cheryl, Is there any other examples of what the challenges are in hiring a diverse workforce? Can you share some of your experience, please?
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes what happens when you're hiring a diverse workforce, one thing you have to always say that there's a lot of resistance to change, right? So definitely you come with a certain baggage, you come with a certain culture. So definitely when you are taken in an organization with a totally different culture and their outlook, it becomes a little bit difficult for you to adapt and adjust to that environment. Second, I think the most important thing is there could always be a sort of conflict. Okay, and I have seen that most of the times, where you try to prove that you know something better than the other, or you want to put your point forward, or you want to say that, okay, I have worked in an environment like this, so probably this is the suggestion I would like to give. So I do see sometimes that there could be conflict. The other most important thing I see is your work style, your etiquettes, your mannerisms. All these things also play a very important role, especially when you take people from diverse cultures and you try to put them together and make them work under one roof. You do face these challenges at times. But as Jiva rightly put it, it's very important to put all that aside and look at the human being first. And many a times, our mind, subconsciously does not do that, because we just feel, and I think every individual sometimes want to prove that they are doing the right thing or whatever they say is right. And so many a times as an individual, though we try to see a human being as a human, we sometimes have that, what do you say, a mask in front of us, and we try to get away from the actual happenings.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. Since you mentioned Jiva, I wanted to ask Jiva, what do you think is the root cause? Why does segregation, exclusion continue to persist?
In my opinion, or with some of the work that we do with civility experts, this may be sensitive to some people, but we feel that the politics and the policies are some of the reasons where we face segregation. Also because and also because people's mindset are still very closed and narrow-minded, and there's lack of opportunities for us to ask or clarify questions. So we all go into an assumption profile to say this is what it is, this is how it is going to be. So these are kind of the things that actually can create harmful habits if it continue to persist. But again, having said that, how is any one of us in control to change the policy or politics? It is, that's why I say it's sensitive, yet it is difficult to be cured, because there is someone at the higher authority is making the decision, assuming in the best interest. But as a civilian, or as we go into the organization, we need to be matured enough, to ask questions. If you do not understand, you need to clarify. So the ability to ask and clarify is so important, and that itself is a culture that must be encouraged at the workplace. Ability to ask, ability to query about why we're doing such a thing, instead of just blindly following and getting upset about it. It's truly not going to work. So it still goes back to, I still stand by it to say that policies and political views does have a great influence in this.
Great, thanks for your perspective, Jiva. Nigesh, if I could ask you, I think when we synced up a bit earlier just to get to know each other, you shared a really interesting story about one of the experiences that you had dealing with diversity in, I think, your engineering in one of the engineering careers. Please, I think that's a great story for the audience to hear.
So the story there is how diversity appears, or, I'm going to agree with Jürgen in this. I think when we caught up as well, I told you immediately that diversity is too much of a buzzword. I think we use that as a crutch sometimes when we are uncomfortable or unable to understand how to deal with something. So we use diversity even as a word to kind of split things in the middle and say that this is different, how do you bring this together? And Cheryl's story kind of underpins that distance we've got to go, right? Because she had that challenge of she being an Indian to suggest someone whose capability matches what's required, but that was a problem as well. So we've got some ways to go, but that story actually is diversity or differences. I'll use that word, differences when it comes to individuals and how they react, and how I had to learn it through making a mistake. So something that Jiva just mentioned just now, where human beings, we actually is the flight and fight response, right? We want to ensure that whatever we do is in the best interest of ourselves, to ensure that we are able to come out winning, come out with the resources, come out with the ability to do more. So this kind of happened when I was working at Texas Instruments as an engineer. And that story is, there's sort of these two divisions in Texas, where there is what we call production line, or online, and offline. So online is where you're kind of considered the star group, because that's facing the customer. That's where the units go out. That's where the products get produced to go delivered to the customer. And offline is considered the support group. This is where the equipments are kept, the equipments are repaired, the equipment are sort of changed for different production styles, the spare parts are kept. So it's kind of treated as support versus what's really important kind of thing. So I was there at online. I was leading a group of 30 different technical staff who were across 3 different shifts. And I knew that in the notion of actually getting customer requests and getting more profits, there were certain white lies that were being said when it comes to equipment maintenance, statuses, and so on and so forth. And this came to one meeting, and I was getting very frustrated at that point. I was very young as well. And I remember it's a meeting with the board of directors, with the head of all the departments sitting in the meeting. And I got too frustrated at that point, and I decided, you know what? I am going to tell the truth. The truth should come out right now. And I said it, whatever you're seeing right now, literally, these are the words. Whatever you're seeing right now is not the real truth. Imagine my managing director sitting right in the room, and he's looking at me like, what did you just say? Right? And I went on to explain like what's really going on. And you have these stunned faces in this boardroom all looking at me. I walked out of the room thinking like, yes, you know what? I've done something right. I've done something right. I see the words I'm using. I've done something right. I have done something right. But then what happened after that was I was taken from online, leading that 30 plus people across 3 different shifts, and I was dropped to offline. And I asked my director, like, what's going on? Why did you drop me there? There are 2 people who are still my mentors. I still consider as mentors, my director and my immediate manager, and asked them that question. And they said that, look, you did the right thing, but in the wrong way. You did the right thing, but in the wrong way, because you're not alone. You're not a man on an island. You are one person working with many people, and many people have many ways to work. And you should have found a way how to make this work. Right? Understanding different people. So when I went offline, it was something that I learned it was a very, very important lesson for me. And this is where that important mindset came to me, which then kind of underpinned why diversity is a buzzword. And people should really look at this, where do not take things too personally, too quickly. When you're working on something, it's actually all about the task. Everyone's trying to contribute to it in some way and some form. If you take it personally, if let's say someone's trying to contribute as much as they can, and that is not to the same level as you're contributing, doesn't matter. They're doing as much as they can. And if you take it personally and say like, that person is a passenger, that's where the problem starts, right? So I took that one lesson, and also the lesson of each individual is different. So I thought about this offline space, and I said, look, what if in this space actually is me, who has had that much experience in the production line, and around me is actually technical staff who are the most experts in all their fields, but they're just troublemakers in attitude because they were like me, right? They were pointing out mistakes, so on and so forth. But they were actually the most experienced people in the organization. So I thought, look, there's all the opportunities to make this a BPS, or best practice site, for all the ATs around the world. And this is an opportunity that I can help create for everybody here. But it was not going to be a one-day thing. So I kind of set a 1.5 year to 2 year goal for that, and started working with each individuals. And this is where setting in cadences and cultures, and how do you actually start bringing everyone into the fold, understanding each one of their capabilities, where they can contribute, what's the best place for them to do that, how to push them to the front. All that kind of came together. And as we did that, we achieved the target in 7 months. In 7 months, that area became the 80 BPS. So meaning every other site followed what we set as a standard for how do you manage equipment, how do you keep stock of them, how do you keep store of them, how do you maintain them, how do you transfer them, all those, and how do we actually keep a shop running with as little cost as possible. And that came out of working with different people, looking at them for their capability and not taking things personally, and ensuring that everyone had a play in what happened.
Fantastic. Awesome story. Second time hearing it, and I still love it. There was even more additional detail that you added, and thank you so much. I think this is a great segue to the next part, which I wanted to discuss or have a conversation with the panel. Is okay, now we've kind of understood from different perspectives the importance of fostering diversity in company culture. I think it'll be important now to talk actually how do we actually go about implementing a company culture. You know, it's great to talk about it, but I think maybe some people might need to know what are the first steps, what do you need to do. So Jürgen, if I could go to you, you know, what are some of the practices from Germany, from your company, on how without, like, I know you mentioned that you can't force policy on diversity, but what are some of the frameworks of things, activities that you guys did that you could share?
You know, the thing is just, I think the key part is adaptability. Yeah, so it's really that you understand the timing, and you know, and also, you know, your surrounding, and also where you are acting. Yeah, so who is your customer and who are your employees, and how can you bring that nicely together? I just in the example of GES, you know, being also on both sides, being in an operative unit directly with the customer for many years, now working in headquarters for many years, I feel GES very close to my heart. You know, I could share similar stories. So we are all going through that. And one of the things for diversity and inclusion is always that in the meantime, a deep believer, no one should work in headquarters before he has worked in a national operative unit. You need the day-to-day experience before you think about strategy and all this kind of stuff. So, but that's a different story. So I would say, you know, what I experienced is that diversity inclusion has two sides. You have a bottom-up approach and you have a top-down approach. Yeah, and I think the culture in the end, and also listen to Cheryl and to the others who are talking, is they have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, it will fail. So it's, you know, you know, if you think of a CEO who is talking very nice words, and the employees never see that something happens, sooner or later they will not listen anymore, and everyone is doing his stuff. On the other hand, there are always people who feel empowered and have a certain belief, and they want to change something. So these people need to be encouraged, and they need to be supported. So what I could observe is, you know, in a family-owned business, fortunately, you know, as it's not about stakeholders, because there's just one stakeholder, which is the family. So diversity and inclusion, talent management, and all these kind of things are critical things which are supervised and guided from the top, but with all the freedom, you know, the leaders need to translate it. And what I get observed, and where I'm very active, and this is what I shared with you beforehand, was the point that, you know, we have a internal headquarters network which we called Böhringer Ingelheim BI Women, with asterisk between the O and the M with a capital letter. So it's women and men, so but nicely put in one word. And what it started originally only women. It was more about gender equality, equal payment. But then they realized, you know, fortunately, to really be successful, they may need some men in their group, yeah, to make it a diverse and support the inclusion. And there I'm now active for 3 years, and this is a very, very successful thing. We have the direct, you know, CEO support. While we are empowered, we have an own budget, we can work on that, and we do that quite intensively with internal and external things. We invite people like you to discuss openly in the closed shop meeting in our company, we have normally 300-400 participants from all over the world. So like we also choose a time of the day where Japan can participate as well as the US. So we make everything, and we get the time from our leaders, so we can do that. We can prepare it and all the kind of stuff. So I would say yes, over the years now, it became part of my daily life, and I think for the company, it's now part of the daily life. What we also did, based on we have with Tahir and with Nigel, two experts also more on that field. For example, for us, time is crucial. Yeah, when we have an idea about a new treatment, it's the money comes from the timeline. The earlier it's on the market, the better. And so we took over some of the ideas from IT. So we are now working, even if it's a new buzzword and I hate it, but now we are working all agile. Yeah, so everything is agility. But what we did is we invented or we included the Scrum idea into our daily business. And we are empowered. We have even an own building just for that, where teams can go in, and work on something like IT. Software developers, we work also this way, and we have people trained. And there the diversity comes back, because you can imagine these 5-6 people, we try to encompass all what we needed to work in this way. So long story short, I guess it becomes a part of it's now part of our culture. I think that's the success factor. And as we said, as Nigel also mentioned, we don't talk about diversity. We have an own department called Diversity and Inclusion, but be honest, we know the people forget about how they are named. So that's a very big thing. So we don't talk anymore about this D&I. And by the way, some people invent now the I is more important than the D and the I, but whatever that means. Yeah. So you are the expert, maybe Chiba and Cheryl, but it's a wonderful thing. I really love to work in this company. And, of course, I'm a baby. I belong to the baby boomers, so one of the last baby boomers, so to speak. Yeah. But loyalty is still a big word for me. But we see in the millennials, in the generations Z people now, loyalty is a different thing now. And if you want to have these people stay with us, diversity and inclusion is a key competitive advantage. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the insight, Jürgen. I think we have Simfung from the chat saying meritocracy, not diversity, wins the day. Would you guys agree? Okay, great. Nodding heads instead of talking over each other. Fantastic. Okay, Jürgen. So just for the for the clarification for the audience, when you talk about agile methodology, that's the way of grouping people together rather than having departments, actually taking one person from each department and creating a team, right? So you have a diverse group of professionals, roles, all working together. Okay, fantastic. Great, thanks, Jürgen. So Tahir, you worked, you're traveling off tomorrow night or tonight. You work with people from all different types around the world. What would you say, whether you're a small business? I know you talked about it's a little bit more difficult for a small organization, but let's say someone has an epiphany in a small organization. What can leaders do to take that first steps to, when they understand that diversity is important, they understand the benefits of diversity? What are some of the first steps do you think that they can take in your experience?
Oh, absolutely, Sanjay. And as I finish the answer, I've got a question for Jürgen. In fact, if you allow me, can I ask Jürgen a question based on some of the things he said? And I'll come back right to your answer. I'm very curious. Yes?
Yeah. Please.
Thank you so much. So Jürgen, you just spoke about the organizational structure and a time-sensitive task at hand, right? So my question is that when it comes to professional etiquette, from a cultural diversity point of view, and you have a time-sensitive job at hand that needs to be done, how does your organization manage and handle that? I'm really curious. So please let me know.
That's a difficult question, Tahir, in the way, and please forgive me, but I cannot talk for 52,000 people now all over the world. I can only talk about my little, world where I am, and at least I can tell you that normally if we have to work on a time critical important issue, normally we are old fashioned, taking a phone, talking to the next people around, where to bring those people to identify and bring these people together. And normally, what was more the challenge in the older days is they are normally empowered to say yes without going through 5 rounds with a line management, whether they are available and if they can leave a task otherwise. So I think it's really about the empowerment, which is a big thing also for me when it's about diversity. Yeah? So when people are not empowered, you can say a lot of nice words. The action is what makes the difference. So I cannot really, maybe Taya, we can do that offline separately, but if you want, but it's tricky. I don't feel comfortable in saying BI is generally doing this way. So I can just say how we are doing in the animal health business unit, and that's about what I try to describe.
Got it. Thank you very much. So sorry, Sanjay. I was just so curious about it. I couldn't wait. So thank you for that opportunity. So your question about the foundation steps that the leaders should be taking to experience the benefits of diversity. I want to start with one of the things I took for granted, and then I'll give some examples. And again, my context would be coming out of Dubai and working in UAE with the corporates and the real estate market, right? So that's where my forte is. So when I came out of UAE, expanding internationally to understand how things work, I had this myth that, it's the 21st century, diversity is not a problem, which is so naive of me to think that just because I grew up in a particular city, country, everyone worked the same way. And then you start meeting literally Eastern Europeans to Russians to Americans to Australians, and you start realizing that as you start moving into doing businesses in their countries, things don't work the same way. And just when we thought that we knew all the cultures coming out of UAE, we were so far away from the truth, realizing that we have not even scratched the surface. So that was something extremely interesting for me. Now, however, the challenge with leadership is for a lot of people, depending which era they come from, it comes either with a lot of ego, and they're like, no, that's it, I said so. Or it is about flexibility and adaptability, where you're like, tell me more about how would you do that, and how does that happen from the part where you come in from. So that's interesting when it comes to leadership, because one of the things we speak about diversity in leadership, and something I teach as well, to be honest, is how much can you listen and understand the individual there, and as a leader understand what strength with the background and the ethnicity they come from, they bring out. I'll give you an example with wealth. So one of the things I would do, and I was doing this in South Africa, 300 people in a room, we're talking about wealth. How many people think money is evil? 80% people raise their hands up. 80% people raise their hands up, and they want to be rich. And I was asking how many expats or foreigners or immigrants were there, and probably about 3% people in the room were immigrants. And I was asking them this question, that as immigrants, how does wealth work for you, and how has that changed your lifestyle? So we had 2 set of answers. One was all about how things never worked, and the other one was because we have nothing to look back for, we are hungry, we're going to make it happen, it's a do or die for us. So that's an example of how conflicting diversity can be when it comes to wealth, as an example. And as a leader, like if I'm a business owner, I'm looking at this individual from X country who's hungry enough, he's going to put in the hours, the effort, compared to someone else who is from the same country perhaps, and is pretty relaxed about it. And he's like, if something happens, I've got my back covered. So in that sense, and I'm giving the pros and cons at the same time, because no one formula fit all. If I said diversity works for every organization across the board, that would be wrong. And I know that all of us as speakers in some form have hinted on that as well. So that's one part of leadership. The second one is, again, a myth, I would say, is that if there is a diverse body of employees, and you've got so much of decision making going on, it will be extremely difficult to get the message across, which Jürgen was just speaking about as well. And unfortunately, that's not true. And again, if you look at UAE from point of the wonders and everything else and crazy stuff, at least in the real estate world, that they have done the man-made miracles. This was done with a group of extremely diverse people in a very inducive environment in that sense. And here's the last one, that someone who has a disability, and we kind of briefly touched on that, if we have someone like that, they're going to hold our team back. And I think that's another misconception. So as leaders, when you see someone, and this is something we teach in entrepreneurship, that when you see someone who has some disability of any form, your job as leader would be, rather than criticizing, and I usually use this famous word that I'm allergic to negative criticism, because that it doesn't serve anyone and it just serves someone's ego. So if leaders can put that aside and find the good, and or find a replacement to or a different position where that disability could actually make that organization a lot more strong, that would be amazing. And again, I'm using the word disability for a lack of a better word at this point, because I also believe that every human being is created in God's image, perfect. We human beings do not have the capability and the understanding of understanding someone in a certain way, and hence we came up with the word disabled at some point. How sad of us. But yes, so as leaders, if we can start working around some of these definitions and renaming them for the sake of the business, entrepreneurship environment, corporate culture that you're in, to bring the best out, I think this will be absolutely phenomenal moving forward.
Fantastic, Sai. Thank you so much for that sharing. So, maybe something that I can help you with in terms of the terminology, right? Disability. I was actually taught, and I got to discover that a term that you can use is differently abled. So that encompasses every kind of differently abled person, rather than saying disability. So I hope that that's useful to you.
Love that.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, we're really running short of time. I really wish we could talk about more. So one last person on this point. Apologies, Eva. Coming back to you again, I love your terminologies because it captures attention very quickly, at least for me. So you use the term as well, social architect. How does that? What is a such social architect, and how can I be one?
Okay, the term social architects are a group of us, okay, from the Civility Experts Canada. Okay, so the idea of a social architect is we are people who actually plan and build together. All right. Like in a leadership point of view in an organization, for the sake of that. So all of them are required to wear the hat of a social architect, because you need to plan and build a culture at the organization. When we talk about word culture or diversity and all that, it actually triggers a lot of points. It triggers emotions in the area of emotion, biasness and all that. But if you have a builder, a person who is a leader in the organization, when I think somebody actually spoke earlier, it's either the culture, I think Jürgen who said, either the culture is actually from the top to the bottom or from the bottom to the top. All right. So we generally say, build a culture that, each one take the hat, play the role as a social architect. That means you be the person who builds that sort of a culture in an organization. I mean, it takes effort to do that. It also simply means, foster this idea, instead of talking about diversity, why not put in thinking skills? Thinking about what would actually work, what would actually fit in best. Change the idea how we think. I think we are all so defined by this word diversity and inclusion, and that itself is the biggest segregation. So change that. Go into thinking skills. And I'll think about how we can actually make a difference. Simply like, even if you meet someone new, think about 5 questions that you would ask. Build that curiosity. Learn new about the whole thing. Once you know something new about the person, generally simple things happens. Respect. Any civil relationship start that way. Simply by respect. When you know something new about the person and you look into the better part of the person, trying to work with that person, is still like looking at their weaknesses. So to me, thinking skill would be an idea. So that's why I said wear the hat as a social architect, so that you actually become a builder and plan what's the culture you want for your organization.
I think with that explanation, without being involved in your Canadian association, I think all of us can go out there and be social architects with the communities that we're involved in. Thank you so much, Jiva.
Certainly, yes.
Right. As I was saying, we really have a running short of time. So the last very thing that I want to jump to and get everyone's short snippet or insight is, okay, now we've talked about challenges, we've talked about some practical applications. What are your parting words for as we come close to the end of this session on things that that we as individuals, the audience, ourselves, can do better in order to bring awareness and action towards the importance of diversity? If I could just go back to you, Jiva, if you could share, what are your last words for the audience?
Personally, for me, my upbringing has been, there's never been a word diversity in my life. There's always been one. So I bring it. So I've lived with people of the multicultural. I've also been enclosed with a person who was also a transgender, and the values that we had at home is see that person as one, as a human. So that's the kind of value we had at home, and it was easy when I was traveling abroad, whether it's for work or whether when during my days when I was studying abroad. It didn't seem for me to have any kind of segregation, because you know what, and generally because I also enjoy meeting new people constantly, so it was easy. So one thing is start looking at people as human. Don't separate yourself just because it's color, race, religion. It takes you nowhere. See them as a human first. Well, those are my words, Sanjay.
Thank you, Jiva. Tahir, if I could ask you three words that jump out at you that you could tell the audience to remember from this discussion about diversity.
3 words: give people a chance. With an A there. Give people a chance. Awesome. because and Nigesh had an amazing story around this where he thought he was, and then his boss comes and tells him. So give people a chance. So no matter where you're coming from, and just because you think you're in a certain way, or you act, you dress in a certain way, or you come from a certain culture, or you speak a posh language, or whatever that be it, to cater for diversity growth, take the ego, put it down, give them a chance, listen to them out with an open mind, and we would create environments. We're becoming a world of one community anyways, and I think that's the last bit where human beings could work in whatever positions and powers they are in, and adapt to that. I think we'll see a beautiful integration of a diverse society.
Thank you so much, Tahir. We have literally only 2 minutes left, so very quickly, if I could ask Nigesh, 3 words again, very quickly. What would your takeaway that you want the audience to go away with?
Never harm another. That's the word that I would say. Never harm another, because you know that you are still going to do what's necessary for yourself to extract as much value as your health. But at the same time, do not harm another person. That way, you will ensure that you're also understanding and accepting the other person.
Fantastic. Jürgen, to you next.
You know, I could even say just 2 words, and this is be fearless and feel empowered. So I think that's the 2 things.
Great. Thank you so much. And Cheryl?
I said life is a beautiful experience. Enjoy the richness of it and learn to accept, adapt, and think of yourself as a global citizen. Do not just limit yourself into a shell. Just think you are a global citizen. The world will look beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, panelists. I think this is one of my favorite sessions that I've moderated. I really appreciate your time on a Friday evening to be here with us, and the audience as well. Thank you on a Friday evening. Unfortunately, we have to go. I'm sure there will be a place where we can put in your social media links, as well as where people can connect with you. And I thank you very much. Have a wonderful Friday evening. And thank you for the audience for joining us, and have a great time.
Thank you, Sanjay. You've been a wonderful moderator.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah.